Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we are going to do part 1 of the reading section practice of the verbal section of the GAT or the qudrat exam. Now this is the first video I'm doing that has to do with reading comprehension, so I chose a passage that basically if you try to practice reading comprehension for the GAT exam, you have done this passage before most likely, but let's get right into it because I did want to explain some key concepts. So first and foremost, we do have the text. In normal cases, I would want you to pause the video and take no more than 2 to 3 minutes to read the passage. No more than 2 to 3 minutes to read the passage. But we're going to read it together today, unless if you would like to pause it, and I will keep scrolling if you want to pause it and then read it alone. But yeah, we're going to read it together. We are profoundly ignorant about the origins of language and have to content ourselves with more or less plausible speculations. We do not even know for certain when language arose, but it seems likely that it goes back to the earliest history of man, perhaps 500,000 years. We have no direct evidence, but it seems probable that speech arose at the same time as tool making and the earliest forms of specifically human cooperation. In the Great Ice Ages of the Pleistocene period, our earliest human ancestors established the Old Stone Age culture. They made flint tools and later tools of bone, ivory, and antler. They made fire and cooked their food. They hunted big game, often by methods that called for considerable cooperation and coordination. As their material culture gradually improved, they became artists and made carvings and engravings on bones and pebbles, and wonderful paintings of animals on the walls of caves. It is difficult to believe that the markers of these Paleolithic cultures lacked the power of speech. It is a long step, admittingly, from the earliest flint weapons to the splendid art of the late Old Stone Age. The first crude flints date back perhaps to 500,000 BC, while the finest achievements of Old Stone Age men are later than 100,000 BC. And in this period, we can envisage a corresponding development of language, from the most primitive and limited language of the earliest human groups to a fully developed language. In the flowering time of Old Stone Age culture, how did language arise in the first place? There are many theories about this based on various types of indirect evidence, such as the language of children, the language of primitive societies, the kinds of changes that have taken place in languages in the course of recorded history, the behavior of higher animals like chimpanzees, and the behavior of people suffering from speech defects. These types of evidence may provide us with useful pointers, but they all suffer from limitations and must be treated with caution. When we consider the language of children, we have to remember their situation are quite different from that of our earliest human ancestors, because the child is growing up in an environment where there is already a fully developed language, and this is surrounded by adults who use that language and are teaching it to him. For example, it has been shown that the earliest words used by children are mainly the names of things and people: doll, spoon, mommy. But this does not prove that the earliest words of primitive men were also the names of things and people. When a child learned the names of an object, he may then use it to express his wishes or demands. Doll often means, "Give me my doll," or "I've dropped my doll, pick it up for me." The child is using language to get things done, and it is almost an accident for adult teaching that the words used to formulate the child's demands are mainly nouns instead of words like bring, pick up, and so on. So, we have completed reading the passage together, and I wanted to basically show you why reading this is a very long passage. So, reading the whole passage is not very time productive, and I want to just give you a little lesson about reading comprehension. So this is, let's say, one paragraph, okay? Usually the beginning is the topic, and then the middle is like supporting, and then the end is concluding. This is a sample paragraph format, right? Okay, so when we have a long paragraph, there are two ways to go about this. There are two ways to go about this. And I want to show you both the ways. So there's method number one. Method number one is you have the intro here. You have the intro, you have the body, maybe like two bodies, body one, body two, and then you have the conclusion. You have the conclusion. You can imagine it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is one of two methods. So the first method is to skim the first paragraph. And what does skim means? Skim means is like a quick reading just to have a general understanding. The second thing is to read the first sentence of each body paragraph. Read first sentence and read the first sentence. Okay. And the conclusion. What do you do in the conclusion? You skim the conclusion as well. Now this is method number one. This is method number one. And after you're done with doing the method one of reading, you can scan for the answer. Scan for the answer once you go to the answer choices. Once you go to the questions, you can scan for the answer, which is step 2 of method number 1. Method number 1. Okay, and what does scan mean? Scan means a quick reading because you're looking for a specific piece of information. So scan is looking for a specific piece of information, and skimming is looking for general understanding. So this was method number 1. Okay, I'm going to erase method number 1 in order to provide you with method number 2. Okay, guys, so we have method number 2. Method number 2 is, let's say you have a long passage and maybe it's like not separated into much paragraphs. It's separated maybe into like 2 paragraphs. Let's say that it's a long passage separated into 2 paragraphs. Let's say that. How would you go about this? Because you definitely can't follow the first method if it's only separated into 2 paragraphs. So let's introduce this. So let's say this is paragraph number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Paragraph number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how would you go about this? So the best way to go about this, in my opinion, is to read the first 4 lines of the first paragraph and then read the last 4 lines of the last paragraph. Meaning you would have a general understanding of the passage, because the first 4 sentences would give you the topic, and then the last would give you the concludings. So you would have a general understanding, because the topic, like, it introduces it and then the concluding restates it in a different way, meaning you would kind of put the pieces together. And then the second thing you would do after doing your whole method, you would scan again. We said scanning is a quick reading when you're looking for a specific piece of information. And when do you scan? You scan when you go to the questions. When you go to the questions, because you are looking for a specific answer. So now that we introduced the correct ways to go about the reading comprehension, let's get right into the question. So the way we did it, the way we read the whole text, is not the way to go about this, but I did want to go through the whole text in order just to show you how time consuming it is. Okay, now let's go to... Okay, so question number 1 says the main idea of the text is it to prove evidence of the origin of the language, to present the need for language, to discuss how early man communicated, to present the culture of early man? We can automatically cross the out because it doesn't seem like a very beneficial fit. To present the need for language, not much, because I feel like the rest of the answers do make more sense. So let's read. So it says to provide evidence of the origin of language or to discuss how early men communicated. Now let's go back to the text for a quick scan. We are profoundly ignorant about the origins of language. The origins of language, meaning they are providing us with the origins of language, meaning that the answer is A. So the main idea is to provide evidence of the origin of the language. Now let's move on to question number 2. Question number 2 says theories of the origin of language include all of the following except changes occurring through the years, the need to communicate, language of children, the first man's extensive vocabulary. Okay, so first we can cancel out the language of children. Why? Because this was included, and they said all the following except, and they did discuss the need to communicate. And did they discuss changes occurring through the years? Yes, they did discuss the evolution. So something they didn't discuss was the first man's extensive vocabulary, meaning that the answer is D. Okay, now let's move on to question number 3. Question number 3 says the purpose of the discussion of the word doll is intended to... Now we remember that doll was used in talking about children and whatnot, so we can automatically cross out question number B. Why? Because it doesn't support the fact that naming things is more important. It's kind of just talking about children. Does it talk about how to show the evolution of many meaning for one word? No, it does. That's not the main, the purpose of the discussion. Is it to trace the evolution of noun or indicate how adults teach the children? Well, they did discuss both, didn't they? But the main purpose of the discussion was to indicate how adults teach children. So the answer is C. Number 4 says, it doesn't all fit in one. Okay. The implication of the author regarding the early elements of language is that there were specific real steps followed to develop our language. I mean, that's an automatic no. I can cross that out right now. Care must be exercised when exhuming what we consider the roots of language. We owe a debt of gratitude to the chimpanzee contribution. Adults created language in order to construct their children. Well, we can automatically also cross out D because this language was not specifically designed according to the text to instruct their children. No. Okay. Why? Because they only discussed a paragraph talking about how basically children came about language. So, do we owe a debt of gratitude to the chimpanzee contribution? No, because that's not what the author is implying when it's talking about the early elements of the language. So it's automatically not C, and we know that the answer is B without even actually reading it because we crossed out using the process of elimination. But it says care must be exercised when exhuming what we consider the roots of the language. So this is the answer. Now let's move on to the 5th and final question of the text. So it says if we accept that primitive man existed for a very long period of time without language, then we may assume that A, language is not necessary to man's existence. Language developed with the developing culture of primitives. Primitives existed in total isolation from one another. Children brought about the need for language. Mankind was not intended to communicate. Honestly, we could go about this with the process of elimination, but for like the sake of this video, I will do the explaining instead of just going with the process of elimination. So, mankind was not intended to communicate. Is that what we can assume? No, we can't assume that, meaning A is also not the answer because they are kind of closely related. And when you have two answers that are closely related, you can automatically cross both of them out because there can't be two answers in one question. Okay, so it says language developed with the developing culture of primitives, and primitives existed in total isolation with one another. Children brought about the need for language. Is that correct? Did children brought about a need for language? They kind of did, but that's not the point because they learned it from the adults because the adult already had a developing and an extensive vocabulary. That's how they learned to make commands and whatnot. So no, because primitives did not exist in total isolation from another, and children were not the purpose of the need of language. And was language developed with the developing culture of primitives? Yes, it was. So the answer is simply B. This is it for the video today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something new. This is my email. If you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me at wizworksyt@gmail.com. This is it for today. This was the first part of the series of reading comprehension. This is WizWorks. See you in the next video.